Today, we're looking at digital outcomes from our lockdown. I realise there are a number of people who joined us from across the Church of England for this webinar today, and we're delighted to have you with us and hope you enjoy your time as much as everyone else. I'm especially pleased to welcome Bob Jackson, Esther Pryor and Bryony Taylor, who will be speaking to us today and whom I will formally introduce in a moment as they each speak. Paradox is usually a sign of the work of God. The last will be first, the meek shall inherit the earth, the poor are blessed. In 2020, we shut our churches and attendances at many online services grew exponentially. The moment we encounter a paradox like that, we need to stop and inquire how the Holy Spirit may be at work. We saw in our webinar last week that our energy levels are not great right now and that there is anxiety about what lies ahead. But we should not simply return to what we knew before without some faithful spiritual reflection on the last few months. What were we missing before that the virus has opened our eyes to? Who are these people checking us out online, this cloud of witnesses in the cloud? How do we use the latest technology to spread the good news about Jesus, knowing that in doing so, we are true to older generations that harnessed new developments with fidelity and imagination? This is an emerging field, and we're very pleased to have three reflectors and practitioners who can share from their experience. In doing so, we want to enthuse and not discourage you, to affirm and not undermine. There is a risk that online ministry becomes competitive because there are some easy, if misleading, comparators to use. We need to interrogate these indicators to help us be smarter, but not allow them to deceive us over the work of God, which grows in secret places. So I'm delighted to welcome as our first speaker this morning, Bob Jackson, who is a church growth expert with vast experience of consultancy work across the Church of England. He was Archdeacon of Walsall and a growth officer in the Diocese of Lichfield, as well as the author of Hope for the Church, Road to Growth and Going for Growth. He's co-founder of the Everyone Welcome online project at the Durham Digital Theology Unit, and his Everybody Welcome course, written with George Fisher, is helping many churches to better welcome and integrate their newcomers. So we're thrilled to have Bob with us, and I'm going to pass over to him now as he speaks to us. Thank you, Bob.
Right, thank you, Simon. Hello, everyone. Great to see you all. Yes, I'd actually retired, last year. I was 70 last year, but this was seemed so important that I came out of retirement for online church, and it's been a fascinating story. Just to say that the first document that George and I wrote about, called Everybody Welcome Online, was really about good practice for online church. And then I wrote this other document, which we'll focus on more today, Everybody Welcome to the Future, which is what it says on the tin. Where are we going with this? What's going to be the future shape of the church? And more importantly, how do we shape it to follow what God seems to be saying? So I'll do three things quickly in the next 20 minutes. First of all, I'll report to you the results so far of a survey we've been conducting of groups of churches. We've been finding groups with 100% response rate, like a deanery. So we don't just look at the enthusiasm and the success stories. And I'll tell you what we found out from the stories of 176 different churches. And then I'd like to offer you a way of planning and thinking about visualizing the future shape of the church, and finally talk about a vision for an integrated or hybrid or blended online in-person church for the future. So let's start with the survey. 176 churches, around the country, most Anglican, but a number of other denominations as well. And I'll give you 8 findings that we've discovered from this survey. Number 1, about 85% of churches appear to have gone online. That sort of 85% of benefices, many of you, if you've got 3 or 4 churches in the benefice, would be doing one service for all the churches, but including them, about 85% have gone online, which is, I think, is a most extraordinary achievement. Almost overnight, the Christian church in this country all discovered how to do this thing for the first time. Amazing achievement. So that's number 1. Number 2, however, including those churches not online, we found probably about 30% of our previous churchgoers are not accessing their church's online offering for worship, either because there isn't one, or because they don't have the equipment to do it at home, or because they choose not to. 30% is a lot to lose. So the first answer to the question, what's the shape of the church to come, if that's all that's happened, the church is 30% thinner, which is not good news. And not all of those folk may return to in-person worship as we gradually come back to it for all sorts of reasons. So also that 30% varies enormously between church and parish. Some churches, nobody fails to come online. Other churches, it's 80%. And it seems to vary with the socio-economic characteristics of the area and the congregation and the age of the congregation. So the poorer the area, the older the people, the fewer come online. So that's a characteristic of everything we've learned, is that the churches have had very varied experiences and may be very different from each other in the future. Number 3, here's the stunner. Average weekly attendance at these 176 churches before lockdown was about 10,200, they've told me. Using a fairly conservative estimation procedure that I've developed to try and work out from the metrics that we get from the platforms, roughly how many people are accessing. My best guess is that we've got about 15,500 people attending the online services of those churches. So that's an increase of about 50%, just over 50%. But that's after the 30% have gone. So you start with 100, you lose 30, and actually you then gain 80, and you end up with 150, which is something quite huge, because I spent my whole Christian life almost, certainly from the mid-60s onwards, where attendance at church has been declining slowly. So this is quite something. Have to be a little careful, because number 4, quite a lot of that growth is people coming to church more often. I'm old enough to remember the 1950s, when it was very, very boring on a Sunday and there's nothing else to do, so you might as well go to church. And if you did go, you went every week. And we've replicated that rather through April and May and June this year. And other people have been two-timing, haven't they? They might have still been loyally attending your church, but they've been looking at other people's as well to see what they're up to. So some of the growth is frequency and two-timing. But I guess about half of it is new people or returnees or the Christmas-only people who are now there most Sundays. And that's a lot of new people. But the experience varies. Only about 55% of the churches have reported online attendance greater than previously in the building. The other 45% is less. And a fifth or a quarter have reported that attendance has more than doubled. So future shape is going to be very different if any of that carries over into the permanent situation when Corona's in the past. Some churches may well have grown a lot and other churches shrunk a lot. Some might have died. It's going to be very different. Number 6, experience has varied with platform. Zoom-only churches' attendance has gone down because it's a private invitation-only platform, gone down about 20-25%. if you've used Facebook or YouTube, then on average, numbers are 40 or 50% higher. If you've gone multi-platform and you're using, say, all three of those or two of them, on average, the average church has nearly doubled. So if you're looking at numbers growth, multi-platform is clearly the way to go. Just over a third of churches have told me that their numbers are still rising week by week through lockdown, and only about a sixth have said they're falling. So some still modest growth through lockdown after the big explosion of growth at the beginning. I'm not sure that's continuing right at the moment, as there are more things to do on a Sunday again, but I've no evidence. My hunch is that numbers might have peaked, but we don't know. Finally, trends in the numbers growth in small churches, if anything, is slightly bigger in percentage terms than in large churches. People have not turned to the big glossy show led by high-tech people. They've by and large turned to local, authentic, somebody they might meet in the street, and it's almost that it's tailor-made for the parish system. So there's some things we've found out from the surveys. Just like to suggest some reasons why now is the time urgently to reimagine church life for post-lockdown, when we begin to get some sort of new normality. 4 reasons for why we should be doing this now. Number one, you dealt with it in a previous webinar. The world we live in will be very different. There'll be a long transition period and then a new permanent difference. And the sort of things, people working from home, the country's going to be poorer, there's going to be unemployment and poverty in previously prosperous areas, etc., etc. Number two, the church you knew will be different. I think all church members will have been changed in some way through the experience. Some people might have left you, other people will have joined you. And then there's all the finances thing. Churches and dioceses taking a financial hit in the short term. Is that going to accelerate the shifts that we're already beginning to see? For example, in the shift to focal ministry, leadership models replacing multi-church incumbency, something I was promoting before I retired. So the church will be different. Thirdly, most of us realise now we've stumbled into online, we can't leave it. We've found a whole new dimension to church life. I mean, in our church, our rector's mum had got too frail to go to her own church, so she's joined ours online. Now, how's our rector going to say to her, I'm sorry, we're stopping online now, we're not bothering with you anymore, now we're back in the building, we don't need to bother with you? He's not going to do that, is he? And neither, I don't think, will most of us. So there's a major new dimension. And fourthly, most churches historically have become more frantic than focused in what we do. I think because the hardest thing in church life is to stop doing stuff. It's comparatively easy to start new stuff, but how do you stop the old? So we make the mistake of adding new stuff without taking anything out. So we get too busy, we get tired, people are stressed, and we don't do anything well. Now the government stopped everything. We got this wonderful golden opportunity to rethink for the future. What's our core vision? What are we really centrally trying to do? Let's restart some old stuff, but let's put stuff that's not central to that on one side, and rethink and reimagine church. And every church will need to have a different content. It's between you and God. But here's a suggestion of a couple of key phrases of what you'll be looking for in terms of the process. Number one is wider doors. The amazing thing we've discovered is we have found a wide open portal into the living rooms of the nation. That most of us, to our shame, hardly knew existed beforehand. And there's been a gratifying response. So how can we keep those doors open? How can we make them even wider? Are there other ways we can widen the doors of the church so that it's easier for people to make contact and join in and be part of a Christian community? And thinking that through and making it a reality is something for the whole church team. It's not just for the clergy. How can we be so welcoming that our doors are wide open, figuratively and literally, to the nation, now that we see vividly the impact of having a suddenly open door, people coming through it. So wider doors. But what's the point of having wider doors if you have nothing deep to offer the people when they come in? So alongside wider doors, I'm suggesting you might like to think about deeper wells. Times are more serious. People are asking difficult new questions. They've got new spiritual thirsts. Old spiritualities are living again. For us Anglicans, almost the biggest growth has been in things like the daily office and compline. How can we offer deeper spiritual wells for the newly thirsty to drink from? Answer the deep questions, heal the deep heartaches, find God in the midst of new uncertainties. And the church that will thrive is the church that has wider doors, but also deeper wells to address those things that are rumbling around inside of people. Now, to enable us to have wider doors and deeper wells, I suggest we actually need to look at church programs, which I just mentioned. We need wiser programs suited to the future, not inherited from the past. So please don't unthinkingly restore everything you used to do as church unlocks. Think it through, pray it through together to find a new way of doing church. And what I'm telling people is we can't guess what this should be. Because even I've been a church leader for 50 years. I can't guess what the people want in this new situation. It's uncharted territory. So we do offer sample questionnaires that you can send round to your congregations. Our church is doing that at the moment. One is to the existing people, and the other one is to the people who've been new online. How are you finding it? What's good and bad? How can we improve? And what do you want to do in the future when we're back in the building, as we're beginning to get back at the moment? So whether it's a questionnaire, whether you phone people up or whatever, ask them. Don't guess or assume. And then smarter structures. We're going to need new structures of leadership and organisation to support the church of the future, not the one of the past. For example, I think the day of the tech-savvy church leader has arrived. So we're all going to need the tech-savvy people at the heart of church life from now on. That's just so obvious, but there's others as well. So I think we're trying to make wider doors and deeper wells, and to help us do that, we'll need wiser programs and smarter structures. So that's my offering as a way of organising the way you rethink church for the future. Now, finally, I think I've just got 5 minutes left. Here's an attempted vision for a blended or hybrid or integrated in-person online church of the future. Some churches may want to continue with the sort of online offering we've had the last 3 months and add alongside it an in-person service. We've just started to do that. We can't start a morning service because too many people come. We can't socially distance them. But we restarted the evening service. It used to get about 15 people, and the first 2 Sundays, I think, we've filled the church social distance with 40. So we're gradually getting there, but we continue the online offering as was. But we can't maintain that forever. I think most churches will find that that meets too many resources, and also it splits people up. So there's the online church and there's the in-person church, and they never meet. So I think for many of us, we're wanting to live stream something we're doing already in the church building. So it's now super urgent to equip buildings for good quality live streaming. Our church is on with that. We've sorted out the broadband, which was a mess, and now we've got a really good broadband in the building. And we've got a quote from a company to set us up, and we're looking at the moment, we're just checking, can we do this ourselves, or do we hire the company to do it for us? And by September, we should be equipped to live stream from the church building. It's a village in Derbyshire called Egham, by the way, if you're wondering where I am. Village of about 1,000 people. So what I'm suggesting is we will grow in the future through combining the best of both worlds, through live streaming and existing services. And what I'm suggesting is that this is rather more than simply putting a television camera at the back to play on the Vicar. And people who want to switch on and watch it can if they like. I suppose that's a start, but I'm looking for a lot more than that. For example, most of us, I think, will want to appoint someone to be an online pastor. Say we use Facebook, so the online pastor's here on the laptop. People clock in the Facebook and say, hello, Marge is here. And the online pastor will type back in the box, hi Marge, great to see you, how are your bunions this week? So there's that sort of interaction going on at 25 past 10. And the online pastor knows the people that are coming online, and those that are close enough get visited, and if they're shut in. And somebody online could be leading the prayers or the intercessions or even preaching. And that all come up on the screen in the church building, and so they're all taking part. It's not one lot taking part and the other lot watching. It's one congregation in two ways of accessing the service. Afterwards, you can mix them up with Zoom coffee, as many of us have learned to do. So you can have a group live in the church hall with another group on a screen. And they can talk to each other, and they can meet during the week, and you get the idea. You can do some home groups can be online, some can be in somebody's lounge. You've got an integrated online in-person church. Just an idea to think through what categories of people are they going to be that are going to access online church. I suggest at least 4, maybe 5. Number 1 is clearly the housebound, the frail, the shielding, the care homes, anyone who can't physically get to the church building, like our rector's mum. And that, for many of us, could be quite a large group of people. And that's marvellous. We'll reconnect with those who have wanted to come to church but were physically prevented. Number 2, those unavailable that Sunday. If you wear a dog collar like me, you've probably lamented the fact that on average people only come to church one week in 2 these days. How can you preach consecutively when it's like that? Well, you can't really, it's no point. But now, if people can access the service later on, if they've been on holiday or working or busy or visiting or poorly, then they can attend at the level we used to in the 1950s again, because you can do it on a Wednesday evening when you've got some spare time and catch up. Number 3, those trying out church who might one day turn up in person. What the few churches I've found discovered who were online, who were live streaming online before lockdown, last year, they've discovered a constant trickle of people turning up in the building who'd spent a few weeks or months first accessing the church online. So the way they join in person is by knocking down some barriers to joining online. So while they think, I'm comfortable enough with this place and these people now to screw up my courage to actually physically go to the building. which we now realise even more is a huge hurdle to so many people. So that's the way that the in-person church will grow in the future, is through the online element and people progressing from one to the other. And finally, there's a group for whom online is their natural way to go to church, and that will include, I think, a large number of 18 to 35-year-olds, who incidentally have been the age group that's most taken up online church going during lockdown, far more than us oldies. So online has been bringing in the new generations, and we don't want to stop doing that. We need to hold those. I suppose number 5 category is people from all around the world who've got some sort of link and fancy joining us. I talked to Vicar online the other day, who's made a link with a clergyman in Nigeria, and he wants this Nigerian to be licensed to his church so that he can preach for them every so often. So he can build links all around the world. So there's some categories and an idea, a bit of a seeing through a glass darkly vision of how it might work. And clearly now is the time to be planning and implementing as we slowly unlock. I think that the future church and its shape has become very exciting. It's up to us to shape it. It's not going to be automatic. We've got stuff to do, but it's a wonderful new opportunity, and it's up to us now to grasp it. That's it.
Bob, thank you so much. That's great. Really insightful and thoughtful reflection on where we're going with digital church. Really appreciate the time you've given. We're not going to break up into breakout rooms now, which will be a relief to some of you, I know, because we want to give you 5 minutes space just to reflect on what's put up on the screen. And I notice there's been quite a bit of chat already going on, so you're welcome to continue that, but you may just want to turn your camera off, go and get a cup of tea or pop to the toilet or whatever it is. But we're going to come back together again at 12:03 in 5 minutes' time, and Esther will then be speaking to us. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. If you're at the screen now, we're going to continue, and I want to introduce our second speaker this morning, who is Esther Pryor. She is the Vicar of St John's, Egham, in the Diocese of Guildford, a premier digital webinar contributor and Vice Chair of CPAS Patronage Trustees. She's married to Matt, and they have a son and daughter. Esther came to England from Zimbabwe for theological education in 1999. And after 2 curacies, she served as a school chaplain, a young offenders prison chaplain, and a team vicar in Farnborough. She loves cooking, reading, writing, body combat, travel, and time with family. No doubt the body combat puts her in a good position for the monthly PCC meeting. You who've been in Rochester Diocese for a while, you may well remember that Esther and Matt were lovingly part of our community here for a number of years before they moved on. So we're delighted to welcome her back today. And I'm going to hand over to you now, Esther. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's a real joy and a privilege to join you. I have a special place in my heart for Rochester Diocese. What Bishop Simon didn't tell you is that I came to England via the Rochester-Harare link, actually, and I probably wouldn't be here without that partnership. I don't know if you remember Tuesday, the 17th of March, when the announcement was made that church buildings were to close. I remember it vividly. I was at a chapter meeting, so the news came when we were together. And I remember I cried, and that surprised me. And then I drove home and immediately sent an email to the church family. I admitted to them that my first response had been weeping. And then I said this: but rising out of the ashes is a thought. We have talked and prayed for years about taking church outside the building, and church being more than a building, but we have struggled to effectively put this into practice. But now we have no choice. I then outlined some of the opportunities that I could see dimly at that time, and ended up by saying this: join me in praying for a bigger church to emerge out of this crisis, a church with a bigger view of who God is, a bigger view of who we are in Him, a bigger heart for our community, and bigger, with more people belonging to this wonderful church family. And so off we went into the uncharted waters that we have all been navigating. Fast forward 4 months to PCC last night, and I am still buzzing. I'm still trying to work out what happened there. But my PCC outstripped me in kingdom ambition yesterday. I have never seen them so energized about mission and generosity. Even our treasurer, who is usually very cautious about money, said something like this: now is the time to spend for the kingdom. And I was like, what? How did we get from that bleak Tuesday to such a buzzy PCC last night? And all of this at a time of great uncertainty. From the beginning of lockdown, I think as a church, we very intentionally wanted the uncharted period that we were entering into to be about flourishing, not just survival. And it's been really interesting for me to try and unpick why that is in the process of preparing for this webinar. And my reflections have led me to 7 C's that I think have kept us from survival to flourishing. and have been at the center of who we are and what we have done and continue to do. So the first C I'm calling confession, in the sense of acknowledging the vastness and unknownness of the crisis that we are facing, and acknowledging the scary uncertainty that we find ourselves in, I think has helped us to then grasp the opportunities that it brings. While I have had no doubt that this is a time of unparalleled opportunities for the kingdom, I also recognize that it's been a time for unparalleled lament, and being intentional about giving voice to our lament has been an important part of the journey for us. And so some of the buzzwords about leadership, like vulnerability and authenticity, have really played a big part. Connected to that is my second C, which is communication. Communicating information, distilling the announcements, communicating decisions, and so on, has taken on a new importance. But so has the softer end of communication. So our Facebook group, which is closed, has become an important part of how we do community, but also as a core team. So the staff team have a WhatsApp group, which is a place of friendship and laughter, jokes, as well as serious stuff. I have a WhatsApp group with my church wardens, similarly there, silly jokes, but also just keeping in contact. All of that has helped us to develop a greater sense of belonging at a time when we could have felt disconnected. My third C is clarity. The importance of clarity of purpose, I think, has been highlighted during this crisis. And I've called it clarity without prescription. And that's led to amazing creativity. So my job has been to be clear about why and what, but giving my team and the wider church community the freedom to work out the how. So for example, I am probably the most untech person there is, but we are blessed to have someone that's really into tech. And our AV team leader, at the start of lockdown, I said to him, the what is, I would like us to be able to live stream our services. The why is, I want this particular church family to remain connected to one another. At first, my ambition was that small. I hadn't even thought about what the online world would open up. We needed to redefine what we meant by I am going to church. While we have understood that church is more than just a building, the phrase I am going to church conjured up pictures of people going into a building to worship with others. Obviously that changed, and very quickly, but I wanted people to think about what they mean now when they say, I am going to church and my church is St. John's Egham. So for us, like many of you, it became the virtual gathering of St. John's church family, the answer to the question, I am going to church. And I said to the church, we can dip into other things, especially now the world is open to us. But what does it mean for us to be connected to one another and committed to one another? So at 10 o'clock on a Sunday, I am committing to be here, and this was our chapel for a long time. And my prayer is that you will be waiting in your kitchens, your lounges, your gardens, or whatever, so that this scattered gathering can continue to meet in the name of God. And that clarity about what and why became the thing that I passed on to every team, and my AV team leader kind of modeled creative response, if you like, to that. The fourth C I want to talk about is continuity. That might sound like a surprising thing to go to, but it's been really important to hold on to the things that have remained the same. When everything is changing, the most important things didn't change, and being able to identify those has been wonderful. So how wonderful it's been to know that Jesus Christ is as constant and unchanging, as solid rock as ever. And more locally for us as a church, discovering that our mission, our vision, our values were fit for purpose for a pre-lockdown world, a lockdown world, post-pandemic world. We're still St. John's Egham, and we're still on a mission to love God, love one another, and love our community. How we do that is what has changed, but the who and what we are has remained the same. And so in some ways, it has been business as usual. And there is something really comforting about being anchored in the familiar. And so each team member having a robust understanding of our core purpose as a church and seeing it as something that held true before, holds true now, will hold true after, has kept us centered and connected to one another. And so our hashtag as a church has been no stopping this church. 5 is certainty, kind of connected to the last one, related to continuity. I love the hymn, I cannot tell why him who angels worship. But, sorry, the reason I like it is that the questions fail to drown out the certainties. And this I know has been an important song that St. John's Egham has learnt to sing even more clearly. This I know, God hasn't been taken by surprise by this. This I know, God is faithful and his faithfulness will see us through. This I know, the Spirit of God has given gifts to his people that are sufficient to face the hour. And if everyone plays their part, we will flourish. But this I know has been an important song to sing, proclaiming some of the certainties of our faith, renewing prayer and devotion to scripture has been a key part of us navigating the choppy waters of the virtual world that we have found ourselves in. Connected to that is the word confidence. Confidence in the gospel, being confident in hope, confidence in God working his purposes out, and communicating that we are invited to be a part of that work. We're in the middle of a vast crisis, and even with lockdown easing each week, no one really knows when, how this is all going to end. But the key task of leadership at this time has been, as I said before, to acknowledge the scary unknown, but to speak words of hope into it, thus enabling St. John's Church to look above the uncertainties and grasp the opportunities that seem to have fallen on our lap by God's grace, and to grasp them with confidence. I really believe that this is an unprecedented time when the whole world is in crisis. And I think it brings with it an unprecedented hope for revival. As I said from the start, I invited St. John's Egham to join me in praying for a bigger church. And I hope they would say that from the start, I helped them to lift their eyes above the uncertainties, to grasping with confidence the unprecedented opportunities that have been afforded us by this unprecedented time. For years, as we have prayed for revival, we've prayed for a church without walls, haven't we? A church that moves out of its comfort zone, out of the comfort of our buildings. And this crisis took that choice away from us. We have become a church without walls, reaching wider and, as Bob was saying, I hope deeper than ever before. And communicating this has given us confidence to keep pushing forward, to keep innovating and adapting. We have prayed for prayer to rise up. And speaking for St. John's, and I'm sure for many of you as well, we now have Bible reading and prayer 3 times a day, unknown of before lockdown. We have morning prayer, midday prayer, and Compline has become a real anchor for people. Lockdown forced those things on us. We have innovated and adapted. We have more people engaging in our prayer meetings. 24/7 prayer is suddenly so easy to resource because people can do it from the comfort of their own home. Prayer is necessary food for godly confidence. And this situation seems to have led people to their knees. Not only that, but worship is in our homes in ways that we couldn't have imagined before. Not even in our most fervent prayers for revival. People are worshiping God in their homes. And for a lot of our people, God probably was left at the door before. And I'm hearing stories of spouses and young adult children joining in, going to church with a church-going member in their home. We've talked a lot about finances as well. At a time of economic crisis, I think what's happened here is that it's enabled us to talk about money a bit more freely. And that has led to unprecedented generosity. So we have seen an increase in our giving in the last 4 months. We have even set up a hardship fund. Now, we have a huge debt of £1.7 million. Yes, you heard that right, £1.7 million. If anyone can pay it off for me, I'll love you forever. But in the context of that, it felt impossible to say to the church, I think we need a hardship fund because, you know, there are people who struggle financially. But this crisis has given us the opportunity to do that. My last C is a double C, if I may, calm center. I think it's a theologian, Walter Brueggemann, who has popularized the phrase to be an unanxious presence. This isn't about denying reality, as I have already said, because acknowledging things are hard is really important. But it's crucial at a time when people feel isolated and anxious about the future to be an unanxious presence, a calm center. Allowing expression of our pain and fears in a safe space, yes, but going beyond that and enabling people to find themselves immersed in God's limitless goodness. When I told my team that I would be talking about us, one of the things that they said which was really lovely, was that this has been important to them over the last 4 months. They said that they've felt safe and supported, that they've had clarity about what they're meant to be doing, and I hope they've had fun doing so. Because I, with the Spirit's help, really intentionally prayed that God would enable me to be a calm presence at the center. So I offer you these 7 C's that I think have proven to be good companions on our journey: confession, communication, clarity, continuity, certainty, confidence, calm center. If I may finish by giving you one concrete outworking of this. As a calm center, we decided not to be slaves to the announcements, because we want to be proactive rather than reactive. So we hear each announcement through the lens of our clear purpose as a church, and we seek God's purpose for each occasion. So our mantra has become, receive the news, i.e. church buildings can open for worship. Pause, let the news sink in, and then very deliberately view it through the lens of our unchanging mission, vision, and values. And then pray very deliberately, what's God's purpose for us now? So at the moment, 2 households are allowed to meet, for example. So I've said to our church, is this an opportunity for us to start house churches where we can do church together in each other's homes? What's God's purpose for us now? What can we do with this new freedom? Think, consult. Is the old thing that we used to do, that we are now allowed to do, is it still fit for purpose? And then come up with a plan of action that works for us. So although we could open the church buildings for private prayer from the 13th of June, we actually didn't feel confident to do it until the 6th of July. And that's fine. Doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. For us, that's what we were able to do. Although we could have been back in church for a public act of worship from the 5th of July, we compromised and started midweek communion slightly different from the way it was on the 8th of July. And forgive the language, but it explains well what I mean. The church building has become a studio without a live audience for now. So just people that are on the team that Sunday are in the building. And we've taken the pressure off and are not even thinking of having a congregation until September. Just gives us time to work out how the new equipment works and so on. When Boris Johnson changed the statement from stay at home to stay alert, we saw that as a signal of movement of what was to come. So our AV team started working to make the church building to enable us to live stream forever, basically. So although we don't have a congregation now, in theory we could. We just wanted to get used to how things work before having to do crowd control, if I can put it like that. With each new phase, there will be opportunities to grab hold of. In our case, we will grab hold of them as we continue with our mission to love God, love one another, and love our community. Thank you. I hope there's been something helpful in that as I've reflected on our journey over the last 4 months. Thank you.
Esther, thank you so much for that thoughtful, deeply hopeful reflection on the 7 C's, which has given us a lot to think about. My son and daughter-in-law attend Esther's church, and having heard Esther now speak for the first time, I kind of know why, one of the reasons why they alighted upon St. John's. So thank you, Esther. We're going to take another break now for 5 minutes. I make it 12:27, a chance to reflect or do what you want for 5 minutes, but we're going to come back at 12:32 to listen to our final speaker, Bryony Taylor. Thank you very much, everybody. Back, everybody, as you're making your way back to your computers, no doubt. I'm delighted to welcome our third speaker this morning, who is Bryony Taylor. Bryony is rector of Barlborough and Clown in Derby Diocese. She's helped many ministers through the pandemic with her blog, bryonytaylor.com, where she posts articles about popular culture and a whole host of practical how-to videos, which have been invaluable in helping others navigate the world of online church. She's author of More TV Vicar, a book about Christians on the TV. She also has expertise in social media and its uses for learning and communication. You can find her on Twitter at Bava, I think, which apparently is Estonian for cool, which no doubt Katerina could confirm, as well as at Pulpit Panic, which offers insights, perspectives, and hot takes, significantly, on the coming week's gospel reading. Which is going to be a real help to all of us now we know about that. Thank you very much, Bryony. So I'm going to hand over to Bryony now and say thank you very much for joining us today, Bryony.
Thank you very much, Bishop Simon, and nice to see you all. A little apology at the beginning of this talk. If you've seen me on any other webinars over the last 3 months, you will hear some of the same stuff again, because this is sort of an amalgam of a number of different talks I've given over the period. So apologies if you've seen me before, you might hear some of this for a second time. Now, I'm just going to try and share my screens. I've got a bit of a PowerPoint that I can share with you, and I think this should be able to be made available to people after the talk. So can everyone see that all right? Has it come up on the screen? Right, the first thing I just wanted to say before launching into some practical things that I've been doing is that online church has been around for a long time. It's been here for years, and there are an awful lot of people that have been doing this stuff for a long time and kind of been ignored by the mainstream church, and particularly people in the disabled community. And so I would recommend, if you've not seen any online kind of church stuff before, it's worth visiting the Disability and Jesus website, where they've been doing this sort of stuff for a really long time. So I'd recommend having a look on there just to see what people have been doing over the last few years. Back in 2010, I did an online 9 lessons and carols service at Christmas, which I was amazed at the time, because it's 10 years ago now. We had about 500 people attend it live, and then an awful lot of people then watched the service later. So I've been involved with this stuff for a while as well. So we just have to be a bit careful, because a lot of us have discovered this for the first time this year, and it's a little bit like being a colonist arriving in America and not noticing that there were some Native Americans already there. You know, so I think we've got an awful lot to learn from the people that have been doing it for a long time. So I just wanted to mention that before I kind of launch in. So the next thing is just, there's 5 simple principles for what I'm going to now call hybrid ministry. I noticed a couple of people mentioned in the chat, what do we do about people that aren't on the internet? I'm going to cover that in what I've got to say this morning. So I'm calling it hybrid ministry, really, because digital has become blended with our lives. It's not a separate world anymore from what we used to call in real life. It's all life. So I think hybrid ministry is probably a better term for where we're headed. So these are my 5 tips, really. The first one, and I think this was referred to by the bishop at the beginning in his opening statement, please don't compare yourself with the church down the road, especially with this digital stuff. Comparison is the thief of joy. That's what Theodore Roosevelt said, and it's so true. You can rapidly make yourself very depressed by thinking, I'll never be able to be like them. So don't play the comparison game. Best to try one thing at a time, perfect it before you then move on to trying something else. And it's okay to say, people, we're going to give this a go for a little while. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So just manage expectations, because we're all learning as we go. The third point is context is key. Everybody's context is very different. My context is 2 small parishes, mostly elderly. A lot of them aren't on the internet. But then I'm reaching other people on Facebook that maybe don't usually come to church. So that's the context I'm in, and I'm on my own as a priest there. So it's just me and a laptop, really. So everyone's context is different, and that's important to remember. What works in one parish won't necessarily work in another. Just like when you get a cutting from someone's garden and it flourishes in their garden and then doesn't work when you plant it in yours. So context is everything, really. Number 4, ask who's missing. I think something that I'm wanting to take away from this time is that need to be as inclusive as we can be with our worship. And we've really discovered how to do that a lot more. And it's really important each time we start something new. Who's going to miss out if we do this? So ask who's not there and see how we can include them. And the last point is keep it simple. Keep it simple. It doesn't need to be complicated. I used to work training teachers in how to use social media for teaching. And I used to say, we used to use the phrase e-learning, and people don't really talk about e-learning anymore, but we used to use the phrase e-learning. And I used to say the E stands for enhanced. It doesn't stand for electronic, it stands for enhanced. If the technology will enhance the experience, then use it. If it won't necessarily enhance it, then why bother? Use a flip chart rather than PowerPoint, if flipchart will do what you need it to do. So keep it simple is what I would say. You don't have to digitize everything. You can still use some of the old-fashioned techniques as well. If they work, they work. So they're my 5 principles. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take you through some of the things I've learned over the last 3 months. Some of it you'll be like, yeah, of course I know that. Other bits you might think, oh, I hadn't thought of it. So I'm not really an expert, really. I'm just sharing with you what I've picked up as I've gone along. So just see what you think. I'll start to plough through it quickly. So I'm just going to give you an overview of some of the tools that I've learned to use, and some of these I've been using for a while, but most of them I've literally just learned how to use. So firstly, talking about recording and sharing audio, one of the simplest ways you can do that is to use WhatsApp. And you'll see on the screen here, you might not have ever noticed when you're using WhatsApp, but there's a little green circular button at the bottom which enables you to record audio, and people can send you audio recordings as well. So a really, really easy way to share, say, a sermon or a prayer with a congregation is to have a WhatsApp group, and then you can record a sermon using the record function and send it to everybody in the group. So that would be a really straightforward way of doing it. So there's basically a very easy, accessible way of doing audio recordings, and you'll find actually that in your mobile phone, the microphone in your mobile phone is quite good quality in comparison with, say, your laptop. So that's an easy thing to do. I'll just quickly mention what I've been doing for my recorded services is congregation members have sent me the readings for Sunday, so the Old Testament reading, New Testament reading, and the intercessions via WhatsApp in this way, because it's been the easiest way. And I've had 80-year-olds manage that, which has been really good. So people have been able to do the readings for Sundays in that way. Something else I discovered at the very beginning of lockdown, which has been brilliant, and I think quite a few of you might be using it, is a free app called Anchor. You can get it on iPhone or Android, and it enables you to create a really professional looking and sounding podcast. And a podcast is just an audio recording. So I've used Anchor for my daily prayer. So I'd send out every day a daily prayer service, and I use the Time to Pray app from the Church of England for that, which is like a sort of midday prayer, and I just record it in the morning, post it on my website, share it on Facebook, and off it goes. And that's really easy for me to just run. So Anchor's a really good place to start. It's also quite a good place if you want somewhere to regularly publish your sermons. You can do the same with that. You can add, there's a built-in library of music as well, so you can add quite funky little like link music and a background theme and things like that. So it's really easy to use, so I really recommend Anchor for that. I also, for regular recording, I use a free bit of software called Audacity, which is worth downloading to your computer if you're wanting to kind of cut and edit audio. It's quite easy to use and pretty good quality, and you can save it in lots of different formats as well. So you can save it in MP3 or a WAV format or whatever you want. You can also use Audacity, incidentally, to record radio programs off the internet, so that's quite handy. I use it sometimes if I've ever interviewed on the local radio station. I then record the clip that I was on, and then I can use that clip on the church website or whatever. So that's quite handy to know. So that's Audacity for recording sermons. One of the things that kind of was on my mind a lot at the beginning of the lockdown was, oh my goodness, what am I going to do about all my lovely old ladies who don't have the internet? How am I going to include them in our worship? And so I saw a blog post by a guy called Paul, who shared how to use an online service called Twilio to set up a dialer sermon system. Basically what it is you ring, it's a local number, and I was able to choose Chesterfield number, which is the area I'm in, and you dial the number and you can listen to this week's sermon over the telephone. And so this is how I do that. So I'll just take you through my little work process for doing that. I record the sermon using Audacity. I add a little message at the beginning and the end of the sermon for those listening on the phone. So I usually start off by saying, hello, you've got through to dial a sermon from the parishes of Marlborough and Clown. This week's sermon's about XYZ. And then it's a sermon. And then at the end, I usually pray the collect and maybe give a little notice if there's anything that I need to share with parishioners. And then once I've recorded all of that, I'm happy with it, I then export from Audacity the audio as an MP3 file. And then something else that somebody pointed out to me that I hadn't heard of before is an online tool called Auphonic. And what Auphonic will do is they'll do audio post-production on your recording. And so they'll basically take out any background fuzzy noise and stuff like that. And you can upload it and it's free up to a point, and then you have to start paying once you've had so many minutes, but it's quite a good system. So I do that as well to make sure that it's a really nice quality recording. And then once I've got the final version, I upload it onto our church website. My church website uses WordPress, but if you haven't got a website that does that kind of thing, you can just upload it to Google Drive or to Dropbox, and it will also work in the same way. And then once I've uploaded it, I just need to get the link for the MP3 file that is on the internet into the Twilio function, which is the system that I've been using. Some of it might sound a bit like gobbledygook, but if you want to know how to set up the Dial a Sermon system, if you go on my blog, there's a step-by-step guide how to do it. It is a little bit complicated, but I did manage it, and I'm not a huge techie. It just takes a little bit of setup. You might be able to find someone that can help you out with that. But once you've set it up, it runs quite easily. And then each week, all you need to do is just paste in the link, the MP3 link, and it will work. And what I did is I sent out this little flyer in the post to everybody in the church so they could stick it on their fridge and they can ring the number whenever they want. I've had to make it very clear to people that they can ring any time of day or night, because I'm not actually sitting waiting for them to call so that I can read the sermon over the phone. Some of them thought that it was sort of a particular time that they had to ring it. But of course, because it's a recording, you can ring whenever you like. And what's been quite interesting and quite scary is that quite a number of people have been listening twice a week. So they say to me, I listen to it on a Sunday, and then later in the week I listen to it again, which is really interesting, the way that people are engaging with sermons in a different way. And one of my old ladies said to me, Bridie, don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes I can't hear your sermon on a Sunday. I think it's because she sits at the back. She's one of those that sits at the back and doesn't put her hearing aid on. But anyway, but she said, but I can hear every word on the phone. Excuse me. So that's kind of interesting. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So now moving on to pre-recording and also live services. I do a mixture. So I do a live service on a Tuesday evening on Facebook, a Eucharist, and I pre-record the service for Sundays at the moment. What I use is something called Open Broadcaster software, which I downloaded onto my computer. It's completely free, and it's basically a little studio for doing broadcasting, and it's brilliant, and it's not too difficult to learn how to use. And I make a PowerPoint presentation in portrait format, so it comes up on the side of a screen, so you can see a screenshot there of me doing one. And you can also, as well as using it for live streaming, you can also just press record, not go live online, and you can just record bits. And that's how I pre-record my Sunday services. It's best to do it in chunks. So I'll record the intro, which is on the screen at the moment. Then I'll record the collect separately, and then I'll record all the bits separately, so that then I've got lots of little chunks that I can stitch together to make the Sunday service. And I've found for me, and there are other ways of doing it, but I found for me that's one of the easiest ways to pre-record your service, and also to have the words come up on the screen, because I think that's quite important for people, the words coming up on the screen so they can join in. Another alternative is to record in Zoom. You can press record in Zoom. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. I don't know where this come from. So the other week, instead of having a sermon, this gentleman, you can see his picture on here, was on placement with us, and it was his last week with us, and we couldn't obviously give him the sort of send off we wanted to the normal way. So instead of a sermon slot, I interviewed him about his journey of faith, and I recorded that in Zoom and then slotted that into the pre-recorded service. So that's another way of doing it as well. And then obviously, once you've got all your bits, you need to find a way of editing it all together. I'm quite lucky because a friend of mine gave me a copy of Sony Vegas Pro, which is quite a fancy video editing software. But you might have, if you've got a Mac, you probably have iMovie built in. If you've got a PC, you might have Windows Movie Maker, which is quite easy to use. And there's a free bit of software called OpenShot that's also quite good for video editing if you want something a little bit fancier. And then when I've finished, the screenshot here is from Sony Vegas, so you can see it's quite a complicated bit of software, but it enables you to do fancy things. But once I've completed the video, I then upload it to YouTube. So in terms of going forward, what am I doing at the moment? So what's available at the moment in my parishes is on Sundays there's a pre-recorded service that's available on YouTube. So that includes readings and intercessions from other members of the congregation, and I lead the rest. And I slot in a pre-recorded bit of music as well, a hymn, and there's an act of spiritual communion in there. On Tuesdays I do a Facebook Live service via that OBS thing that I showed you. And I record that at the same time and then upload the recording afterwards to YouTube. So that's that kind of multi-platform way of doing it. So it's live on Facebook and then I upload it to YouTube afterwards. So there's a nice back catalogue of services on YouTube that people can just access. Because actually people that have smart TVs can watch YouTube videos on their smart TV. So I found quite a few people have been doing that. So it's quite good to be on YouTube as well as on Facebook. On Thursdays, I've started a service completely over the telephone. So I've replaced my midweek Eucharist, which is usually, on a good day, you've got 10 people there. And they're very frail, the ones that usually come. And we usually use the Lady Chapel as well, which is a small space. Of course, it'll be a long time before we'll be able to have our services like that again. We may never be able to do that again. So I've replaced that Thursday morning Eucharist with a phone church service and basically use something called YPay, which is a free telephone conferencing service. There's a number that you dial and then you have like a code to put in. A bit like the way you can dial into a Zoom meeting. You put a code in and then you put another code in and then you're in the room with everybody else on the line. And when anyone joins, you hear a little ping and you know somebody else has joined the meeting. And we have a communion service over the telephone. I posted out the order of service to everybody with the phone-in details on the front, and it has been brilliant. And I have to say, out of all the things I've done, the phone church has been the most intimate and the closest to being worshipping together, more so than the Facebook stuff, because you can hear everybody else's voices. So I say the Lord be with you, and they all say, and also with you back, and it comes at a slight cacophony because there's a slight delay on the line, but it's been fantastic. So I would really recommend phone church because it's dead easy to set up. And I know one of my friends over in Blackpool, she's going to basically put her phone on the altar when she takes her service in the church on Sunday and have it dialed into the free YPay number so that elderly people that can't come physically into church, they can at least ring in and they can listen to the service over their telephone. So that's an alternative to live streaming that really doesn't take very much at all, apart from as long as you've got a decent enough mobile phone signal, you could do that. So that's another alternative to live streaming, is enabling people to just dial in and listen over the telephone. Every weekday I do a prayer podcast using the Anchor app, and every week I upload a new sermon to the website and to that Twilio system for the diary sermon. So what am I getting rid of as we move back into church? There's only one thing I'm stopping, and that's the pre-recorded services on YouTube on Sundays. I'm going to keep everything else, and in fact I'm looking into how we might live stream as well, the Sunday morning services. Just looking into that at the moment because I'm not sure the signal's very good, so I might actually do the phone-in thing instead. I think I'm running out of time, so these are just some of the bits of hardware you might need. The software I've mentioned all of these things as I've been speaking, so I'm sure this will be made available to you to have a look later. And you can always have a look on my blog. I've tried to do some little instructional videos on how I've used all of these things. Just click on the link that says coronavirus help, and there's various little reflections and videos and stuff. Those that I did early on aren't as good as the ones I did later because it was all a work in progress, but I was just showing my workings basically. I was showing my thinkings as I went along. And I also mentioned at the beginning about Disability and Jesus. They've got a really great website called An Ordinary Office, which is a daily prayer service. That's been running for a really long time now, and it's run by disabled people. So if you want to see how they've been doing this sort of stuff for a long time, and especially about accessibility, have a look at that as well. I think I've run out of time now, so that's everything I've got to say. So thank you for listening. I hope you found some of that helpful.
Bryony, thank you so much for that lively, imaginative and practical guide to digital communications. Really great for you going through that, and I know people will have taken away a lot of good stuff from it. We've just got a few minutes left. We intend to finish about on 1 o'clock. And I know there have been lots and lots of questions have come in over the course of the last hour and a half. And just going to pick out one or two that have been forwarded to me. I appreciate that we won't have time to look at all of them in the space we've got left, so apologies to those whose questions we don't ask. But first question, and I'm happy to put it to you as a panel, so whoever wants to speak is welcome to. How do we identify the new people in an online congregation?
Quick go at that while the others think. In our church, we use Facebook, so we ask people to sign in to the service, and most people do. So we've got names, and then we ask around, who knows this person? And usually there's a link, so we begin to get contact details. Anyone who, quite a few of them, press the like button, and then we get access to their Facebook page and we find out more about them. Anybody appearing new on the family service that I run, sort of Fresh Expression, we take steps to get their mobile phone number. So I've got 6 or 8 new families who've joined us online. I've got their mobile phone numbers. I'm about to phone them all up to say, come round to our house and say hello, bring your family, and we'll have some fun in the garden. So that's what we're doing. How about the others?
I don't know yet. I suppose I'm trying to work it out myself, that sort of thing. Because I think particularly with YouTube views and stuff, you've got no idea really.
Yeah, YouTube's not nearly as good. That's one reason for doing Facebook. So you have to find out who the new people.
Yeah, but I think just asking people to get in touch with you and say, yes, are you new here? Send us a message. Yes. You know, we'd like to know what you think and stuff like that. But I think there are a lot of lurkers, and I think one of the interesting things is the sheer fact that you can actually press pause or stop or fast forward the online stuff is actually making people watch it. Because they've got that option of opting out, which they don't have if they physically come into our church building on a Sunday morning. So I think actually that's actually working as a bit of bait, really, for, if you use the analogy of fishers of men, you know, the bait is the fact that actually you can actually opt out if you want to, which I think is quite interesting. So yeah, but I don't know whether we have to be in touch with all these people, as if we you know, we cast the bread out onto the waters, don't we? You know, and that's we'll just let God do what God does.
We did that with an offer of an online alpha course, just with a notice in the. And we normally, if we're lucky, we get 2 or 3 in a year. We got 16 on an online alpha course who've responded through being at online church. Most of them weren't coming to church before.
Yeah, I'm with Bryony here as well. What's happened to me in terms of my own thinking, which has really surprised me, is I think I've become less controlling. It's quite humbling to put stuff out there to this unknown world, but taking comfort in the fact that God knows it. And what lockdown has done for me, I think, is it's given me a bigger vision of the kingdom. So whereas before I would have been obsessing about St. John's Egham must grow, now I think, what if someone stumbles on this in China and comes to faith and I never meet them? That's fine. So it's been an interesting time in the way it's changed my view and my obsessive control. And what Bryony said about the freedom to come and go. As part of my sabbatical in 2017, I went to different churches, and Hillsong was one of them. It was in a theatre in semi-darkness and multiple entries in. And I sat there and I thought, gosh, this is part of your success in drawing people here. because they can come in at any time. It's dark, no one can see them. They can come out anytime. Now, I'm not saying that's brilliant, but actually there is something about the soft entry that online church has created that's enabling the Nicodemuses to go to Jesus under the cover of darkness. Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
panelists. We may only have time for one more question, actually, if we're going to finish about 1 o'clock. And this one is about, there is already existing online church, which has been around for a decade or so. What actually have we been able to learn from their expertise in the last few months?
I'm not sure we've asked the questions enough, actually. And I do feel for a lot of my friends that have been doing this for a long time, and they've been saying, we're here, you know, and I think everyone's got so excited with all the new tech and think that they've discovered stuff. So I think we probably almost need to have an apology, really, and maybe try and see if we can get some of their voices heard more, to let them come and share their stories of what they've been doing. I mean, I've been reflecting myself how you know, in 2010 I did that 9 lessons and carols service online, and I ran it for 3 years. And then once I was ordained, I kind of forgot all about it and got focused on parish ministry, because that was the context I was in. And I kind of didn't connect the two. And I kind of think, why didn't I do that? So I think the thing is to actually let them tell their stories, really, and hear from what they've been doing. But certainly, I think a lot of disabled people have felt kind of excluded by the mainstream church, and so they found their own ways of doing church online, and that's often been poo-pooed by mainstream church, saying, oh, that's not proper church, you know. And we've discovered now that actually you can have very deep, meaningful experiences online with God. You don't physically have to be in the same place. So yeah, I think there's a bit of a confession element there, certainly for me. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think the answer is just to ask them, really.
Yeah, me too, confessional. We wrote Everybody Welcome Online and then realised that we'd missed out reference to folk who've been online before us. And we tried to put that right. If you go on the website bit.ly/EWO2020, that's our website, the University of Durham. And there's an update to Everybody Welcome Online, which hopefully picks up something of the learning of the people who've been online before us.
Thank you. I think we have arrived at 1 o'clock. I'd love to go on. It's so tempting. But actually, apart from the fact that Bob's got to be in Cardiff in the next few minutes' time, somehow or other, and I'm sure that Esther and Brian, and indeed the rest of our participants, have other things to go to. So we're going to keep to time, and obviously we will be sharing by the Rochester Digest recordings of what we've done today, so that people can reflect on them further. So don't worry about that if you haven't been able to take everything down. But I do want to thank Bob, Esther and Brian, especially for their contributions this morning on top of their existing roles in life. We've really appreciated it. And I'd encourage all of us to continue our reflections on what this means. We have prominent, often beautiful church buildings in our country. The question we might ask ourselves is, what kind of digital architecture do we need and want? Because how this is shaped will influence our faith, our worship, and our everyday discipleship for the rest of our lives and beyond. To paraphrase Winston Churchill's famous quote on buildings, we shape our digital communications, and afterwards our digital communications shape us. It's that important. Leave us with that thought, and I'd like to close now with prayer. Let's pray as we remain in our rooms. Heavenly Father, we give thanks to you because you are Alpha and Omega, beginning and end. And we thank you, we can trust you to be our guardian and our guide through these challenging times. We thank you for all that we have learned through the experience of lockdown around digital church. And I pray now for each participant, all churches represented, that you'd grant to them wisdom, grace, and understanding, a listening ear, creativity, and assistance. But as we each look to see how we might develop our mission for you, you would give to us by your Holy Spirit all we need to achieve this. Keep us from competition, anxiety, jealousy, or fear, and instill in us that spirit of power and of love and of self-control to guide us as we journey onwards. We ask this in the name of our risen Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.